Rock Solid Radio wants to thank Maxwell Construction, who has been our sponsor since the very beginning. For over 30 years, Maxwell has delivered the highest quality projects by holding to their core values of customer satisfaction, positive attitude, respect, and excellence. So if you have any kind of commercial construction need, give Maxwell Construction a call today at 812-537-2200. Welcome to Rock Solid Radio. I'm Linda Hutchinson with my husband, Merle. And to be honest, our hearts are heavy today after hearing the news of another mass shooting, this time in an elementary school in Uvalde, Texas. So, yeah. Hi, honey.
Hello. How are you?
We're kind of changing things up a little bit in our normal scheduling and just really acknowledging this really difficult day, difficult week we've had.
Yeah, it's been a week since the shooting, and this was not obviously a planned show from our perspective. But, you know, I think is because we do so much work with families and marriages that this was a good time for us to break from the regular calendar or schedule of shows. And really, I do want to say, like, we're not going to fix anything here today, okay? And that's not what this is going to be about. This is going to be so much more about just trying to look at your own family, your community, and we're calling this show Reducing the Risk. You know, we're not talking about eliminating or anything like that. We're talking about, man, like, this is sad.
We'd love to eliminate it, but in our lifetime, that's not going to happen.
Yeah. Well, because we know that we don't reduce all evil until Christ comes back again, right? Yeah. And so the human nature is not going away anytime soon. But we can definitely start to reduce the risk. And we have to, as we always talk about, we have to start in our own home. And so we're going to be talking a little bit about that. We're also just going to be talking about where we can have control, okay? Control over the things we have versus one of the most disappointing things that I think we see in all of these shootings, which they in and of themselves are bad enough news, but right away then you have every politician jumping on the news screen and talking about this one item that will fix, whether it's guns, whether it's drugs, whether it's whatever it is. And it's just so much more complex than that.
Sure.
It's so much more complex than that. And so we want to take a break from that kind of conversation and really try to uplift what we can do.
Yeah. So, you know, trying to make sense of a very senseless evil act is impossible. And so we're not here to try to do that or fix things. You know, first we want to say our hearts and prayers go out to the families in Uvalde, Texas, and really for the kids who have been traumatized by this, you know, there's a lot of survivor guilt when it comes to things like this, where either be a teacher that lost a coworker or, you know, there were some spouses that went into the shooting, but they lost their spouse. Like there's situations there where you just can't imagine the heartbreak and the grief that people are going through. And so we first want to say that we are praying for you, and we understand that this is beyond understanding, this is beyond comprehension. And so we're really talking to the parents out there who now have to have conversations with their children about this news report, about the situation, age appropriately, of course, and how do we as parents help our kids not to be more anxious, more fearful of going to school, going out of the house, being with strangers. Like, it's a really scary time in our nation, and especially with the shooting that happened weeks ago at Buffalo in a grocery store, or the shooting that happened the very next day or so in a church. I mean, these are supposed to be safe places for you can go with you or your family, and it's hard. So we can't bring back those 19 children and those 2 teachers, but maybe we can open the eyes and the hearts of our listeners and try to reduce the risk of how do we move forward when we have things like this, when we have tragedies that occur and our families are really rocked and our fears kind of well up in us, and as a home, as a family, as a community.
Yeah. You know? Part of the grieving process is obviously to go through the questioning and the anger and just all of the whys that come from this. But we know in working with people that ultimately those families, if they're going to come through this, and you'll see families that went through, the Newtown, Sandy Hook,
Columbine, you name it.
When they ultimately, they never forget, but they ultimately have to come and say, so what are we going to live for now? How are we going to allow this to make us move forward in a better way? And obviously, that's not to say that these people need to do this today, because they're deep into the grieving process. Sure. But ultimately, they are going to have to. But we as a nation right now can start to say, okay, I might not be feeling the immediate anguish that those people directly involved are, but I can be thinking now, like we've talked about before, 9/11. 9/11, the phrase that came out of 9/11 was never forget. And then never forget is what prompts us to say, okay, so what are we going to do
differently?
And that's how all of these restrictions and safety measures have been put into place for travel and just terrorism and things like that. And some of them we don't like, some of them you don't agree with, but that's not the point. The point is how do we move forward with positive energy and being proactive?
Right. And sanity is doing the same thing over and over and expecting different results. And so if you are listening and you're looking for, how do I reduce the risk? How do I protect my family? How do I help my kids? How do I improve my community? We're here to talk about that today. So, but before we do, we need to thank our sponsors.
Let's thank some sponsors. We do want to thank Maxwell Construction, Casey's Outdoor Solutions, and the Hummel Insurance Group for sponsoring Rock Solid Radio. So we want to thank those guys again and their continued support. So if you're doing business or work with any one of those sponsors, please just thank them for what they do here for this messaging and for Rock Solid Radio.
Yeah. Also, before we move on to our topic some more, we want to remind you that we are interviewing couples right now for our next round of Rock Solid Marriage. It's our online couple coaching program that we wrote and we present. And so we would love to have you, if you are married and looking for something to take your relationship to the next level, to really strengthen it, hun, because I believe like this tragedy we're talking about today and those others that we've mentioned, like those are storms that come beat against your home, come beat against your family and really rock your world. And so how are you going to withstand those storms? And so as a couple, as a marriage, we want to really help you. So we would love for you to be a part of it. We launched June 29th in our next round. And so we're interviewing couples right now and getting them set up to really start with us.
Yeah, so reach out to us. We're putting that together. That's going to be some great stuff, and I think we are wrapping that up right now with our first group that came through and getting great feedback from that. So jump in there. If you just don't even know, give us a call. We'll talk about it and see if maybe it's the right fit for you or not, and we'll go from there. Yeah,
so you can reach out, rocksolidfamilies.org or 812-576-ROCK. That's 812-576-7625.
Also, I would like to drop a little bug into the future. So we actually have just been able to secure something that I think is very related to our topic today. And we have been approved to do some work for the Summon Dearborn School Corporation. And this will actually start the week after Labor Day. So I know, we just wrapped up a school year, but it was important for us to get this secured and locked and put on the calendar. So we are going to be starting the week after Labor Day. We will actually get more specific dates and times and everything on that. But we're going to be doing our Families Rock program. And that is going to run 4 to 5 weeks. And we are going to cover the same kinds of ideas that you're going to hear us talk a little bit about today. And we're going to be able to do this at a community level within the schools with the parents and the teachers. And so if there's anything that we believe is like, okay, what do we do next? It's this kind of thing. Okay, so be tuned in. We're going to be doing Families Rock starting in September, and it'll run 4 to 5 weeks where we're still pinning all that down. But it's going to be a great opportunity to stop finger pointing about what everybody else is doing wrong and start pointing back to your home. What can we do better in the home? Yeah, and so we could finger point, as you said, hon, all day. And I think back to the verse in Matthew 7 where it talks about, why do you worry about the speck of dust in someone else's eye when there's a plank in your own eye? And so we're really talking about the plank today. We're talking about what can we do instead of pointing fingers and blaming everybody else and it's everybody else's problem.
we really need to look within and say, okay, what's our job? What's God calling us to do in the middle of this tragedy? And we could talk about gun laws and drug laws and mental health help and money thrown to this or that. But, way too often that's a reactive side of the picture.
Right.
We're looking at it as a proactive side of the picture. What can you do? Because that's what we are all thinking, like, what can we do? We feel so helpless, right? We're watching this on the news unfold and we're thinking about those families and like, what can I do today to really get proactive?
It just kind of prompts some of my thinking about social activism, and there are social activists. And over the years, I've watched a lot of social activism, so have many of you, I'm sure, and I've come to fish through some of that. Many social activists, when you actually look at their life, their individual particular life, is a mess, right? It is a mess, whether they've got issues or whatever. And you find that they are reaching outside to get something, whether at a government level or a federal level, something bigger that they can plant their feet in and go for, and whether it's doing marches and all that. And I want to say that's not a bad thing, the social activism, but first and foremost, you need your activism in your house.
Well, yeah.
And that's where we really want to talk about. Like, listen, I love the social activists who also can speak from the idea that they've got their house in order.
Right.
They've got their house in order, and then they believe in something, and they want that belief to go out. But if you are a social activist, if you're chanting about gun laws and about mental illness and all these things, and your own world is a wreck, hey, just do us a favor. Work at your own world first, right?
Yeah.
Do your own, and again, let's get that right.
Well, and the same is true for, on a simpler level, bullies. We've told our kids over and over that when those bullies are lashing out at you, it's because they themselves feel that insecurity and feel that low self-worth. And so in order to make them feel better, they put you down. And so and to the extreme, the white supremacist and stuff like that, like there's something inside them that feels so insecure and so low on the self-worth that they feel like they have to do these things, lashing out to make themselves feel better. And so we really got to look within. If we're pointing fingers and we're shifting blame and we're really yelling and screaming across the aisles and crazy stuff that we've been seeing, like, come on, let's really think about what do we have the responsibility to do in our own home with our own lives.
Most powerful place we can start right there. And so anyway, as we talk about this today, these are some of these societal ills, all right? And they can be grouped together with a lot of different things. It can be homelessness. It can be drug use, abuse, overdosing. It can be child neglect. All right. There's a lot of these societal ills. And so these societal ills are things that we want to get into today. And it just so happens that the trigger, so to speak, and no pun intended, today is the shooting. But it could really be applied to any of these other things, these ailments. And so we want to start to empower in that way.
Yeah.
Right.
And we're not saying we're going to eliminate these risks. Okay. We're really talking about reducing the risk today, reducing the risk in your own home, in your own life, in your own family. And so we're not foolish to believe that we're going to change things in a day. But human nature is selfish and we live in a broken world. But there are things, when we really are hurting, there's things that we can do to help the situation.
So first and foremost, as we kind of start to walk through this, so it is important to look at the data. It is important to look at patterns. We talk about patterns of behavior all the time.
Yeah.
And when we fish through these different ailments that we see, whether they're the shootings or the drug use or whatever, we have to start to fish through and say, okay, so is there a pattern? Like, is there something that we can spend time and energy on that is going to be a good bang for the buck?
Yeah.
And so that whole idea here is these are some common trends that we see. We see things that aren't taught well, that aren't modeled well, okay, that it's not starting in the home. And so there's some commonness. And again, this is not to say, like, let's just say that we see a common thread of divorce. Okay, that's not saying that every divorced family situation is going to produce mass shooters.
Right,
That's not at all. It just increases the risk.
Right.
Right. When we have separation of parents, when we have a dad that's out of the house, it just increased the risk once again. And that's our point here. how can we reduce that risk? And
Yeah.
so many of the things that we deal with, the divorce, the bad dad situations, the bad mom situations, the child neglect, all of these things are just upping the risk.
Yeah, and so we've done this with our Families Rock, but there is an organization called the Search Institute that really boiled it down into some critical developmental assets that really do predict success and health of a child and then of a family. And so what we want to do is just kind of highlight some of those critical assets, these patterns, as you say, that are common in the health of our child. And so if you want to make a difference, if you want to reduce the risk in your own home, whether it be the mental health of your child, but also really helping them with peace and reducing the anxiety they feel right now, then let's focus on these critical assets. So mention one.
So the first thing, what do we do with these? And we're going to teach, model, and expect.
Yeah.
Right? So teach, model, and expect. So
write that down.
as parents, as coaches, as teachers, we are going to teach, model, and expect.
Yep.
And when this becomes part of what we are after in all that we do, okay, then we start to reduce the risk. So teach, model, and expect.
That's so huge, hon, because you can say all day what you want, but if you're not modeling it home and you're not raising the expectation of this is what we do in our home, then it's not going to go anywhere.
Yeah. So the very first thing that we are going to look at for the teach, model, and expect is what we call character and integrity, right? The character traits. And so, I've talked about this before in other shows, hon. It is a for a purpose that our school, Bright Elementary, and probably every other elementary school across the United States had to adopt a character quality or character education program.
Yeah.
And I've said before, there's nothing wrong with that, but it's a day late and a dollar short.
Yeah.
Okay. It should actually be starting in the home.
Yeah.
And so in the home we teach, and this is where things like manners come about, of respect
honesty.
and trust and honesty and work ethic. Okay. And so these are things that start at the age of 2. At the age of 2. And so I teach, model, and I expect at the age appropriate level character and integrity, not just when it feels good, but every day.
Yeah, for sure. And so that's the C in the core assets that we're talking about today, okay? The second one is the O, and that's really optimism and hope. And so in times like this, honey, if we don't create an environment in our home that there is life and purpose in our life, then our kids are going to feel hopeless. And so we as parents have got to teach optimism and hope. What do we put our hope in? Okay, because there's a lot of things that we're putting our confidence and hope in that is pretty empty, that are pretty, letting us down. And so we've got to help them see that optimism and hope is where we find that purpose and that real passion of life instead of feeling like life is not worth living. And so the O is the optimism and hope.
Hannah, I'm going to go on to not really a tangent, but it's a supporting factor of this, that let's make no mistake about it. We know that one of the critical factors is actually where do we get our hope from, as you said.
Yep. We're going to talk about that in a second.
We really have to dig in because when your kids, like right now, when your kids are feeling hopeless, like we have one who's feeling hopeless in math right now, okay? And we get that. But if that is continuous and they never see any light at the end of the tunnel, all right, the desperation starts to set in.
Yep.
And so we have to say, okay, listen, tomorrow's a new day. Tomorrow's a fresh start. Look what we have to look forward to, and we teach, model, and expect. Like when I see my kid he's down and he's dragging his tail, I'm not going to tolerate that for any length of time. We're going to say, hey, let's go. Let's move through this. And you have to, some kids are wired to see the negative. Some do not see that. They go right to the positive. But those who get stuck in the negative, hey, come on, bud, let's go. What do we have to look forward to? And we want to teach, model, and expect.
We don't want to kick them while they're down, though.
No,
you know?
exactly.
So, yeah.
Exactly. We have to help them know they can get back up.
That's why the Bible says, parents do not exasperate your child. I didn't even know what the word exasperate means, but basically it's like, don't just kick them while they're down. Like, don't pile on the hopelessness and the anxiousness on them. The O is optimism and hope.
Yeah. All right. So the next one, this is in our core. We actually have, this is R.
R.
There's 3 R's, and these are huge, all right, because these are the things then that your kids can carry, how they carry themselves, okay? Yeah. And this is respect, responsibility, and resourcefulness, all right?
R.
Yeah, and so this respect, first and foremost, like respect for who they are, right? The idea that they are a precious being of God, that they are not garbage, that they're not junk, and the idea that they take care of themselves, they respect themselves, and
others.
Yeah, right. But I can't respect another if I don't even respect myself. If I don't respect myself, and this is where the bully things comes in. If I don't respect myself, the only way I'm going to uplift myself is to make somebody feel worse or be worse off than I am. And so the idea that I do have to start with a healthy vision of self, right? And then I practice and expect the respect of others.
Yeah, responsibility is the second R. And so we believe that we need to give our kids age-appropriate responsibilities. You know, do not do for them what they can do for themselves. Please, please, mom and dad, you are enabling and entitling a generation of kids who feel like it's someone else's job. And so the R is responsibility.
Yeah. And the last R there is resourcefulness. And the idea here is, think about this for a second. The idea that we so quickly get answers these days relative to any other generation. We just Google it. It's just right at our fingertips, and which is great until it's not. In other words, when the answer's not right there in front of you, we have very little durability to persevere. Right?
Yes.
And because of that, our resourcefulness, our lack of, leads us to getting frustrated and angry, upset. And so the idea that we allow our kids and even ourselves to kind of dwell in that, this is uncomfortable, and then go to problem-solving mode. And because problem-solving mode is what it creates the resourcefulness. Well, I'm bored. I have nothing to do. Okay, go figure it out. Go find something to do. And whether it's to go outside and start nailing a couple pieces of wood together and have a new bike ramp that you go break your arm on, whatever it is, like the idea that we have resourcefulness to try to get through that difficulty.
You know, I think about, and this has happened, I think, last summer, one of our finer upper echelon malls literally had a gunfight where a guy took someone else's parking space. And it's like that erupted this ugly thing over a parking space. And so it's like, come on, guys, let's respect one another. Maybe you feel like that was yours. But I mean, resourcefulness, responsibility, like you are responsible for your reaction to that. That's your responsibility. And so we've got to really teach this to our kids young so that they don't feel like they could just blow up the first time someone doesn't tell them yes, or they don't get their way, or things don't work out the way they like it, or it's frustrating and hard math, or, you know, fixing your bike or whatever. We got to help our kids.
Yeah, you kind of mentioned that shooting, and I'm thinking in my head, like, the frequency of road rage incidents.
Oh my gosh, yes.
This is a perfect example of a societal ill where we have not found better resourcefulness and respect, right? And because of that, things aren't going exactly the way I want in the moment. And next thing you know, we're flipping people off. And now today, we're flipping people guns, right? And showing guns is like, holy cow.
Yes.
And that is another symptom of an ill society.
Yes. And it starts in the home when you have a child that's young. The E in our core assets is empathy, and that is toward the world around them. Your children need to have empathy, and that doesn't come naturally because, you know, that terrible 2 stage is all about me. You know, you need to do for me. I don't care if you're crying, you don't like what I do, but like, we've got to help our kids understand looking outside of themselves to a world and how they can help make a difference.
Yeah. So, you know, I can't speak enough about empathy because it's really the downfall that it's the primary downfall within the marriage when we see the marriage go bad, because the opposite of empathy is selfishness.
Yes. Yeah.
And so when you see, we've talked about before, there's only one reason for divorce, and that in its very core center spot is selfishness. Like, I don't really care what you think, I'm going to do this, all right? And we deal with couples in that situation all the time. And when you go to that, you no longer even care to walk in somebody else's shoes. You no longer care to put their lenses on and see how they might be seeing things. And so, like right now, these shootings, one of the things that we need to be doing is sitting back and try to imagine what it feels like to be in one of those family members' shoes.
Yeah.
You know, and then be thankful that it is not you, but the idea of like, oh my gosh, I can't imagine going through that. And the reason why we want to try to experience that level of empathy is because it'll create the emotion in us to help be willing to drive change.
Yes.
Right? If I just go, wow, you know, that's too bad for those guys, and I move right on, and I don't memorialize this, which, by the way, this is Memorial Day, right? And so the whole idea of us remembering what happened so that we take action to change.
Yeah. And so again, age appropriate, but with your kiddos, you need to process these kind of situations so that it doesn't just fall on deaf ears and they don't care or they don't even know, but that you don't almost, maybe create this drama so it's so overwhelming for them that they feel out of control. So we've got to help put that O back in there of hope and optimism and still show that, okay, guys, we're going to pray for these families and we hate that this has happened, and how do we protect our family and how do we help others? And those are the kind of things that make a difference in our world.
All right. So we're going to do a quick little snapshot of how you can make sure, okay, are we doing things well in our home right now in terms of just setting up a functional pattern, all right, of being successful. And so there's something here that we've talked about in many shows, but this is, again, at the foundation level of trying to help us reduce the risk. And the first thing is knowing what is priority in the house in terms of how we set up a value system. First and foremost, and we make no apologies for this, and we've talked about it many times, we do have to put God first. In other words, he's the major principal player here. Like, we follow him. So in the home, God is first.
Yeah. And, you know, I was just listening today of a program that was talking about this and how there's so many laments in the Bible. David lamented over the grief, the death that he experienced, and he was very raw about it. He was very like, God, where are you? Why is this happening? Do you even love me? Like, those are real, raw words from the Bible. And so we are allowed to question. We are allowed to lament. We are allowed to grieve, okay? And so that doesn't mean that we just polish it over and forget about it. But we do put God first. We trust in him. We believe in his promises. We do it his way. And when we do that, we show our kids that there is something bigger than us in this world. And he hears us and he sees our cries and knows our needs. And he is in charge. So he is not out of the picture here. Right. So even when things seem out of control and dark, there is light and there is hope.
Yeah, lamenting is kind of wrestling with God,
yeah,
right, versus detaching from God. Yeah. And so the idea that I am struggling with this, and God, why would you let this happen, right? And then continue to seek him out and follow his way.
Yeah, someone else actually said the other day, "Is prayer enough?" And I said, "Well, prayer's a start. You know, we've got to continue to do these changes in our family, in our world, but we've got to start with God. You are boss. We trust in you, and we surrender, and we cry out to you for your comfort, for your strength, for your guidance."
Yeah, that's an interesting thing. Is prayer enough? Prayer is our reminder that we should be humbled in the face of the Lord, right? And so, you know, you can pray for all the stuff that you want, but the idea that you are submitting to, you're in an act of submission. That's why we pray that we are submitting to a greater authority, and we are going to try to work under that authority, right? And so that's kind of what, okay, I'm rewriting my ship here. I'm taking me off the throne, and I am putting him on the throne.
So when I would teach the acronym for pray for my kiddos in ministry, and I would teach them how to pray, I use the acronym PRAY, and it's P, and there's a couple acronyms, but I like the word P for praise him, acknowledge him as Lord and Savior. R is repent, which means we're going to say, God, forgive me. I'm so sorry. This is what I've done. A is the ask, which was an easier word for our little guys to understand. Like, okay, you can ask him what your needs are and what you want. But then the Y is the yield part. And the yield was really helpful for the kids to understand, like, in the long run, in the end of the day, I'm going to trust God. I'm going to yield to his way. And so that's what we're asked to and called to do.
Yeah. So our first understanding, God's first. The second, in every home, guys, every home that we can potentially do this in, it's mom and dad are the second priority. Yep. It's mom and dad in the leadership role. It's not to be questioned. Well, it will be questioned, but it's not to question whether they should be leaders or not. The kids are going to question it for sure.
Sure.
But the idea that
they're kids.
The parents are going to lead. And let's just be clear, again, not pointing the finger at divorce specifically, but look what happens. We've done show after show on the idea of how when parents do divorce, when there is that break, that all of a sudden we have a wrestling match for who the leader is going to be.
Yep.
And the kids will start to try to manipulate that. And we're not going to blame those kids, right? But when we start to manipulate that, we start to try to bend the values, the expectation in each of the homes.
Yeah.
So we have to keep mom and dad unified.
Yeah.
And even if there is a divorce situation,
Please.
if there is, still unify on how you're going to bring these kids up into this world. All right.
Yeah.
So mom and dad, you have to be a priority here and actively, positively involved in your kids' lives.
We have really, really allowed the culture and our kids to dictate who is the boss in the house. And we do a whole class on this, whole seminar on who's the boss. And so really our kids really believe they run the show in your house, and a lot of them they are. And so mom and dad, we really need you to step up and be the authority. I'm not saying you have to be this dictator, right? That's the authoritarian. But we want an authoritative approach of, this is how it's going to work. And when we do that, we start to see our kids start to really want that. They want that safety and security of someone guiding them. But when they feel like they can call the shots and literally bully you to get what they want, all heck breaks loose.
Yeah. And again, we are not saying that this automatically creates a mass shooter.
No.
What we're saying is we're increasing the risk for bad things to happen.
Yes.
Okay. And again, that's what all of this is about.
Yes.
Let's try to do whatever we know we can, whatever has actually been proven out time and time again, what actually reduces the risk.
That's when the kids say, my curfew, I'm not coming home in my curfew, or you can't tell me what to do, or this is my phone, you can't take it from me. Like, those are the things. If you're hearing that from your kids, then you've lost the authority and the position in the home as being the boss.
Yeah. If you sweat your kids being in trouble more than they do, you know who's in charge.
Yeah.
Okay.
And so we've got God first, then each other, spouse. Our marriage is really second priority, and then the children. And so mom and dad, our kids need to know they are a priority over our work, over soccer games and practices, over our buddies and our friends, over our pastimes. Like, our kids need to know that they're a priority, but they're not the boss, right? You and mom and dad are the team that are over them, but then they need to see themselves as an important part of the family.
Yeah. So the last area, guys, that we really want to make sure that you put time in, and oftentimes this is flip-flopped, and we put this at the top, right? And then we wonder why things are going all awry, and it's because we haven't done the first three things that we just talked about, okay? So this next thing is, yes, we do want to make sure that our community, our schools, our churches, our work, that these also endorse and support the same value system that we believe is important to help reducing the risk, okay? So I am not asking my school to teach my kids all of these value system. I'm asking my kids to endorse the one that we believe is important, okay? And to support it, and yes, to practice it and all those things. The church is the same way, even our workplaces, okay? Our community, like, there's a reason why when you start to see a neighborhood have a lot of crime and a lot of bad stuff going on, that all of a sudden you'll have this blight situation where people they exit out. And who can blame them, right? Because you're trying to surround yourself with better. If we can catch that blight early on, if we can catch it early on and we go, whoa, we need to clean up our own house.
Yes.
And if we can get the people to buy into that, you'll have people actually, I know in a lot of communities, they'll have like summertime cleanups.
Right. Or neighborhood watches.
Yeah. And so they're actually saying, you know what, we see what's going on here. Let's go take care of our house. Let's clean up our own yard. And then let's go help clean up the other yards that we can, so that we keep the community supporting what we value.
Yeah. And so when we say community, we're not just talking about like what neighborhood you live in. We're talking about what church you go to, how you support and encourage the school system that your children are in. And so all of that, it is true. You are who you hang around.
Yeah.
You are who your friends are. And so what is it that your kids are around? Who is it that they're surrounded by? That's your job, mom and dad. And you need to highly, highly encourage that and really, I hate to use the word manipulate, but to formulate what that looks like for them as much as you have control. Now, when they get their license and they get a job and they're moving out of the house, then Katie bar the door. But we're talking about when they're under your roof, how much influence are you giving them that's positive and healthy?
Yeah, we're trying to give them the tools so that when they do start to get those licenses, that they have a level of self-discipline on a value system that we all respect, right, versus self.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah.
All right. So hopefully this is a show that you took away that Merle and Linda were not talking about gun laws, about mental illness, which, listen, we have a stance on those things. Okay. But that's not really the issue. All right. Like we've done. Yes, I could get into the mental health thing. I could get into gun stuff, which, by the way, I'm a gun owner. Okay. But that's not the issue. The issue is the core of our family as it relates to doing things God's way. Yeah. And I said nothing about religion right there. Okay. Yeah. It's about us understanding our connection to doing things by God's nature. And so we challenge you guys as you are walking through and hearing the same news that we're hearing. Stop looking outside, start looking inside. Yeah. Make sure you get your house in order first, and you start with your connection to God, then your marriage, and then how we're parenting and raising kids. If we can actually adopt that, okay, we're going to see, not overnight, and that's why all of these politicians would love to get an overnight fix, all right? We could change one law in a matter of a couple weeks, and then everything would be fixed. That is not even close to truth. Yeah. The truth is we have a lot of illness in our fabric as a nation. Yeah, and in our own homes. So let's start there. So we're so thankful for you and listening, and we hope that you will share this show, that you will give us a 5-star rating. That's the only way we bump up on the reviews, and we really hope that you will keep tuning in to Rock Solid Radio, because we're here to really help you, to equip your families, to encourage you as mom and dad and husband and wife. And so, if you have anything that we can help you with, please reach out to rocksolidfamilies.org. You can hit the contact button, or you can call us at our office at 812-576-ROCK. All right. Very good. We want to thank our sponsors, Maxwell Construction, Casey's Outdoor Solutions, and Hummel Insurance Group. Thanks again for those guys coming alongside of us. As Linda said, share these shows. This was a heavy show today. We did not really get the joke around or anything. My heart is heavy, hon. Well, it speaks to man, we've got to get this right, because this is a cancer that is growing by the day. And this is something that does not call for a lot of joking and humor. We really do need to get down and get to work in this. So let's reduce the risk. Let's reduce the risk. Yeah. All right. Thanks again for listening to Rock Solid Radio, building a stronger community, one family at a time. Make it a great day. Rock Solid Radio wants to thank Hummel Insurance Group for sponsoring today's show. Hummel Insurance Group now owns and operates 7 different offices located throughout the tri-state area. For over 50 years now, the Hummel Insurance Group has been assisting customers with insurance needs and questions. For all your insurance needs, contact Hummel Insurance Group at 812-537-1785. Rock Solid Radio wants to thank Casey's Outdoor Solutions. Casey's is a premier garden center and gift shop located in Lawrenceburg, Indiana. They offer a wide selection of high-quality plants, landscaping materials, and home decor. They do amazing high-quality work and can help you transform your indoor and outdoor living spaces into something beautiful. So stop by Casey's Outdoor Solutions today and let them know you appreciate their support for Rock Solid Radio. Visit Casey's today at 21481 State Line Road, Lawrenceburg, Indiana.